All right, hello. My name is Kim Carter, and I'm one of the analysts in the KDE, Division of District Support. I'm just going to briefly go over what we call our audit validation tool. And we do have some post instructions that will be posted online. We have last year's out there now, but we'll be putting some updated instructions when it gets closer to the time that your audit reports are due. What this tool is, in the fall of 2016, KDE created a validation web template for districts to compare their audited AFR to their actual audit report information. And the use of this is not currently required, but we do, suggest that you do it as optional because it helps you figure out your differences between what you have input in Munis and what is actually on your audit report. And I know some of you that have been here a long time are used to us contacting you around January and February if you have what we call material differences between your audit report and what you've entered in Munis. So if you do this optional tool, it'll kind of help you kind of work those things out ahead of time and helps you become more familiar with your information. You're going to go to the application just as you would when you're entering your information for your AFR. It's going to be your same sign-on, your username. And when you go to do this, you're going to go to Financial Forms and Tools, like normally. And then you look for Audited AFR. And this is the same way you get into when you're submitting your files that you submit to another branch in our area. But to do the actual validation tool, you have to wait until your AFR has actually been approved. And that's done by the analyst in Chase area. So when you see your district name will automatically populate, but that next drop-down menu, you want to make sure that it says approved, because if it doesn't, you won't be able to go any further. So if your AFR has been approved, you'll just hit validate, and it'll take you to the next screen. And what this is, it has two tabs, one for AFR and one for balance sheet. And there's a drop down, and you're going to be able to go through each fund. And in our detailed instructions, it'll tell you more about like which statement to go to in your audit report. The instructions are very self-explanatory. We just wanted to give you just a real high-level overview today, just to kind of let you know it's out there. It's a tool that you can use if you'd like to. So on this screen, like I say, you'll see, say for instance, Fund 1, and you'll select that. That'll come up automatically. But on this screen here, you want to make sure you hit Import All first. And when you select that, your numbers from your AFR that you submitted will populate on this screen. And the layout, it should be real similar to your audit report and the statement, so it's real easy to to use. And then you're going to be able to just kind of click on that where you see that arrow and actually enter a number from your audit report. And then there's a section too if you need to, to enter any comments. And each entry, most of them are self-explanatory, but when you go through the instructions, you'll see a couple of lines require a little bit more calculations. So in the instructions, they'll give you a little bit more detail on that. And this is just kind of a snapshot that comes right from the instructions. It kind of talks a little bit more how to enter transfers in and transfers out, because in a couple cases you will have to add a couple numbers together depending on your audit report to come up with this number. So I won't go into a lot of detail on it today, but I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of it, how you do that. And the same thing is just kind of highlighting different entries that you'll need to make. And then you see that circle. If there's a difference, the program will automatically calculate it for you. And I can go over that in a little bit. When we do your review, we don't look at every difference. We have a certain threshold, say what we've been using, it'll probably be the same for next year. We use 5% of your general fund balance. And if the difference is over 5%, then we'll contact you and ask either you to correct it, or it could be something that your auditor needs to correct in the audit report. But that's kind of how we look at that. And if you know what the difference, the reason for it, then you can put, comments in there. same thing, it's just kind of highlighting. This kind of explains a little bit more detail about how to include transfers in and transfers out. Some audit reports, it might be reflected a little bit differently depending on your auditor. Some audit reports may have transfers in and out separated, listed out separately, and some may not. So this screen just kind of explains how to do that. And again, all this will be in the detailed instructions. That just shows where someone had put comments in when there was a difference, and that's kind of how it'll look. And again, you're going to kind of go through each fund. You'll have your Fund 1, Fund 2, then you're going to have your proprietary funds, and then your fiduciary funds that come up. And this is just an example of what, you know, the screens look like as you kind of go through there. You'll also be putting information on your on behalf payments, and these are usually found in the notes of your financial statements. So on this screen, you'll just really be entering one number. And you're going to do the same thing when you select your balance sheet tab, and you're going to go through your proprietary funds if you have daycare, if you food service. On this one, you may have to add some numbers together also. Some audit reports list total assets and deferred outflows separately, so you have to add the two numbers together to enter here. Some audit reports may have it already calculated together. The audit reports are pretty similar, but there's a couple things that differ sometimes depending on, you know, who your auditor is. And again, this is just an example of the fiduciary funds what it would look like when you enter your information. For your school activity funds, right now, we don't require that those are in Munis. So when you see those on your audit report, you can put them there, and you can just put in the comment that KDE is not required to, you're not required to enter the activity funds in Munis. And that's what we do when we do our review. We may still enter it, and we just put a note that they're not currently in Munis. Do you have a question?
Well, just that it said not currently required. Is that something that's coming?
It may in the future. I'm not. Do you know, Steve?
It's possible. Once the question was, is this a requirement to do this? And no, it's not currently. But if we get the bugs worked out, the little bugs that there are, kinks, it's possible they might be in the future. Yeah.
Okay, at the bottom where you see it circled, when you get to the end, there's also an option where you can run the report and look at the information that you've entered. And it should be, you see PDF circled there, but there's a drop down that you could also download the information and bring it over to Excel if you want to see the information, you know, that you've entered. And there's also at the bottom, let me go back, you'll also see after the download, you'll see a submit button. I'm not sure if that's showing up there or not, but when you hit submit, you'll get a message similar to this. And you say yes or no. And then you should get a confirmation, you know, when you're finished. This screen just talks about what I mentioned about thresholds and what we consider material. Because as you're going through, if you do see a material difference over 5% and you want to correct it, you can request for you to go ahead and correct that, and you wouldn't necessarily have to submit yet, and we would reject your AFR, and you'd get the option to correct that ahead of time. If it's under 5%, you don't have to do it. So we suggest that you wait until you go through all the funds, and if you have some differences that are over 5%, then don't submit it yet. You contact us, and then we would allow you to make the corrections to your AFR and resubmit. And then once you've done that and your AFR has been approved, then you could go back through the process and then submit this to us. Those of you who have been through it are familiar with, us contacting you if you have to make any corrections. And like I said, if you want to put any comments in explaining the difference, feel free to do that. And same thing similar with the on behalf, this kind of explains it, the way we calculate that might be just slightly different, but it's basically 5% too, if you have anything over 5%, if you could, make those corrections. Because normally, if you, those of you who have been through the process before, we have about 3 or 4 analysts that'll be reviewing all these audit reports, and we may not get to your particular district until January or February. So if you complete this right after you've submitted your audited AFR information, we kind of get to work out any differences, you know, ahead of time, and also while it's kind of still fresh in your mind, which would help. I know I kind of went through it pretty fast. Any questions or? Mm-hmm.
I have a comment. This, and I'm an auditor, this
Okay.
would be a really helpful tool if it was available before we submitted the AFR and before we submitted the audit report. The fact that they have to submit the AFR first means we're just doing extra work.
Right, we've had that question before too, and so far what we've been able to work out with our programmers, you know, we haven't been able to work that out yet, but hopefully in the future, you know, that might be something that would be an option.
Yeah, I don't know if you all heard that out in the field there, but Denise's question was, why do we have to wait for the AFR? I don't know. Do you have a suggestion on how to populate the numbers prior to the AFR? I mean, that's kind of the
No, I'm not a tech
kind of where we are. So
person. I'm not a tech person.
Yeah, I know,
The
but
answer to that.
I mean that's kind of why we do it that way, because that's where we get our numbers. So
So is
kind of
that
how it
something
works is
you
you have
do
to submit
a
the
cube for?
pardon.
Is that something you can do one of those cubes for? That you could actually populate it based on their information?
I don't know, but how it works is, yeah, and you've tried it, and so you're familiar with it. Is you submit your AFR, and I believe if you have issues and you need corrections, then we just kick it back so you can make your corrections and you resubmit it, right?
And then we have to do it again.
Well, the tool, yeah,
Yes.
okay, yeah.
We can generate the AFR before we submit it and use the numbers and do that reconciliation first and see if everything lines up and then submit the AFR.
I mean, that's kind of our thinking, I believe. So you may have to do it a couple times, but yeah, it seems like that's logical thinking, is to do it a couple of times until you work out the differences, or the ones that may have material differences, the 5% differences like we're talking about.
So if it gets kicked back or you need to resubmit, does it zero out all the numbers that you've entered?
No, I believe the numbers that you've entered will still be saved, just your AFR side would recalculate. But when you hit import all, that would recalculate, but any numbers that you've entered from your audit report, those would be saved. So you wouldn't have to key everything back in.
Yeah, so the question was, would the manually entered numbers, would they be lost? And the answer to that is no. Just the entered AFR numbers would be put in there.
How fast after the final AFR is submitted is it updated for these reports to be created or to compare it to the financial statements? Is it within a day, a week?
As soon as your AFR is submitted, now we have our other division that Karen actually works in, they have to look at it and make sure it's passed certain edit checks. So as soon as they approve it, you'll be able to do this tool. So it varies. Would you say, Karen, how long it takes to get the AFRs approved?
It doesn't take very long.
Doesn't take, okay.
In a perfect world, everybody's here, everybody, gets it like bing, bang, boom, yeah. Yeah, it could be
Okay.
really
Just when it
fast.
goes to
but,
pending, we have to
mhm.
evaluate it.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, so it's pretty quick that you'll be able to go ahead and do it, yeah. Yeah, and normally we would give you, the due date would be around November 15th, but sometimes some districts are right up until November 15th, submitted their, information. So we'll have to decide on a deadline, and maybe like a week after that to
yeah.
give.
I mean, 'cause
other
this is
districts that are,
doing this is gonna save both of us time, so yeah, this will obviously afford an extension.
But if the finance officer, you know, did it on the 17th and found a 5% error,
Mhm.
talked to you all and said,
Mhm.
hey, I found a 5% error.
Right,
Can we change it? Then you
Yeah.
don't have to deal with it in January.
yeah.
I guess it would be,
Right,
How I would
right, we
see
just
the
get it worked out
program.
earlier, right.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
All right. All right, you're gonna talk a little bit about the
Um,
findings, just,
Yeah, I'm just gonna briefly go over, we did get the report from APA on the desk review findings. Once KDE is finished with their review, with the analyst, with our review comparing the audit reports to Munis, then the audit reports are reviewed by the Auditor of Public Accounts Office. They do what's called their desk review, and it's an annual process that happens every year. And so we do have results of that, and we'll be emailing them out to all the auditors and the districts between the next week or so. I did look this morning, it's not posted on their website yet, but we do have the report. And when we send you the email, we'll include a link to the report. There were only 4 districts this year that had, were classified as what they call technically deficient. There are 3 categories: acceptable, acceptable with deficiencies, and technically deficient. So the APA reviewed 173 school districts, 5 nonprofits, and 6 universities. And based on their findings, there were 75 acceptable reports, 105 acceptable with deficiencies, and just 4 technically deficient. So when you get your correspondence, it's mainly for your information. If you could use that to help when you're preparing the audit report for fiscal year 18, so you know what needs to be corrected. Only the 4 districts that were technically deficient, those are the only ones that we'll need a response from. The auditors are going to be required to correct those audit reports and resubmit those to us within 30 days of being notified. So, like I say, this is a normal process that we do yearly. So if you have any questions, you can, contact myself or Steve or anybody in KDE. All right, thank you.